We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
In 1961, President John F. Kennedy challenged the Soviet Union to race America to the moon, initiating Project Apollo. In 8 short years, Apollo missions altered man's view of planet Earth, ushered in the age of technology, landed a man on the moon, and completed one of the most challenging rescues mankind has ever faced. Behind these historic events lies Apollo's greatest legacy, the unique leadership that made Apollo possible. Apollo's place in history began after World War II shifted world leadership to the United States and the Soviet Union. President Truman's doctrine to contain communism initiated the Cold War era, with America ahead in weapons technology. But after the Korean conflict, the Soviets began to inch ahead, and by 1957, the Soviets launched Sputnik, causing world leaders to question America's superiority. Senator Lyndon Johnson of Texas realized that America's infant space program required a new system of organization, or America would lose the post-Sputnik clamor for leadership. In 1958, Johnson championed the National Aeronautics and Space Administration Act, placing America's space program under civilian control, and oversaw the enactment of the National Defense Education Act to bolster scientific and technical education. In April 1961, just months after President Kennedy's inauguration, Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first human to orbit Earth. Kennedy now made space his top priority, and pressured James Webb to manage the monumental reorganization of America's space program. Webb had the political influence and knowledge necessary to establish a network of support for NASA, but he did not want the job.
If you want me to be the administrator, it's going to be a balanced program that does the job for the country that I think's got to be done.
Kennedy offered Webb a gentleman's agreement. Webb could run NASA any way he saw fit, if Webb would protect the White House and shoulder blame for any disaster that might occur. Webb agreed and convinced Kennedy to set a long-range goal of landing on the moon. To procure funding for his programs, Webb doubled his budget estimate and presented it to Congress as an administrator's discount.
Back in the day when we were doing Apollo program, which is in the heyday of the space program, we were spending about 4.5% of the gross national products.
3 months later, Webb would begin one of the largest, costliest, and most ambitious engineering projects in American history, consolidating NASA's Washington headquarters, the Jet Propulsion Lab, the Goddard Space Flight Center, and the Marshall Space Flight Center under one umbrella. Using the program management concept, Webb recruited Dr. Hugh Dryden and Dr. Robert Siemens, creating a management triad that oversaw all major decisions, centralized authority over design, engineering, and procurement, and agreed that lunar rockets and spacecraft had to be built primarily by outside industry.
NASA did not have the capability to do the work at that time. NASA's now grown to a large organization, but what they had was management skills.
90% of the entire $24 billion Apollo budget went to over 500 private contractors and employed upwards of 250,000 people from coast to coast. Webb's system of space-aged management organized all of NASA's divisions and challenged technological boundaries, laying the foundation for Apollo's success. In February 1962, John Glenn's Earth orbit proved that NASA had arrived as a mature player on the world stage. Webb also added 3 new facilities in Texas, Florida, and Mississippi.
We have a capability with 5 facilities linked with water transportation, so this nation can have the capability to do anything it needs to do.
Conflict over who controlled NASA's programs and planning decisions led to the Webb-McNamara Agreement in January 1963, which distinguished between liquid-fueled rockets with exploratory objectives in space and solid-fueled missiles with military objectives. Webb now had clearance for NASA to manufacture giant boosters for the moon without interference from the Pentagon. At Webb's request, Air Force General Sam Phillips became the director of Apollo's manned lunar landing program. Webb also replaced Brainerd Holmes, head of the Office of Manned Space Flight, with George Miller, one of NASA's most fearless and brilliant managers.
George Miller was the associate administrator for manned spaceflight. And as a result of that, he had the overall responsibility for the leadership of the program. He had exercised the responsibility for control over the various centers that were participating in the program, as well as the contractors.
Miller tore through every department related to Apollo and challenged all the current assumptions, timetables, and expectations. Mercury proved that man could live and perform in space. Gemini developed and tested new technology for astronauts to rendezvous, dock, and perform spacewalks. Von Braun's Saturn V rocket developed the technology needed to put a man on the moon. But tragedy struck Apollo 1. On January 27, 1967, Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee died because of faulty capsule design.
They were using oxygen, pure oxygen, in the capsule at the time when the fire went off. And of course, all three guys were killed in that accident.
Congress suspended manned spaceflight for 20 months to investigate. A report from Sam Phillips containing crucial information unknown to Webb compelled Webb to honor his agreement with Kennedy. To deflect blame from NASA and the current administration, Webb offered his resignation to President Johnson in October 1968, but his management structure continued to drive Apollo towards its goal.
So he had already set in motion exactly how we were going to proceed and what we were going to do, and it was done that way.
Christmas Eve, 1968, Apollo 8 astronauts became the first humans to orbit another world. Their photos forever changed man's view of planet Earth. The following July, Apollo 11 astronauts Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins left Earth to make space history. Armstrong's one small step for man fulfilled Apollo's political goals, firmly establishing America's superior leadership in space. His giant leap for mankind blazed a trail for human exploration beyond Earth. During the Apollo 13 crisis that followed, the entire world witnessed leadership at its best as Gene Kranz and his Tiger team used a disciplined brainstorm technique to solve formidable obstacles, bringing American astronauts home safely.
This is the passion I had in mission control. Apollo 13 said we have never lost an American in space. We're not going to lose one now. This crew is coming home. You got to believe it. Your team must believe it, and we will make it happen.
After Apollo 13, public and political interest in the moon waned. Under President Nixon, NASA became just one area of domestic policy competing with other concerns. With subsequent budget cuts, NASA's new administrators canceled the Apollo project in 1975 after the Apollo-Soyuz mission docked Soviets and Americans in space. Under Jim Webb's leadership, Apollo began as a race between enemies and ended with a handshake in space, symbolizing détente during the Cold War and promised a partnership that would later build the International Space Station.
Our dominance in space was exhibited in Apollo, and that echoes today. Today, NASA is the lead partner for the International Space Station, and really just about any international cooperation in space, countries look to the United States to go lead that, and I think that's largely to Apollo, and that's whether that's regardless of whether it's a human space flight or even a robotic space mission to another planet.
But Apollo's greatest legacy is its journey, not its destination. Before Kennedy challenged Americans to land a man on the moon, he hired James Webb, an extraordinary leader who could create a roadmap for the journey, inspired new technology to carry astronauts to the moon, and build a support system to return them safely back to Earth. Apollo's Webb is proof that the right leader, one that can organize, manage, and motivate great numbers of people, can alter the course of history for mankind.